Hello everyone. So we have already studied what is taxonomy and nomenclature. And now is the time to study taxonomic hierarchies and taxonomical aids. Now taxonomical hierarchy is a very important topic of this chapter, and questions have been asked from this topic in NEET and AIIMS. So what is taxonomic hierarchies? So what happened was that for our convenience we made a classification. So we humans thought that it would be easy for us to classify organisms if we have a certain stage. For instance, in this proper taxonomical hierarchy, species is the most fundamental unit or the basic unit which actually exists in this world. So species is our fundamental unit. It's our fundamental unit that exists in this world. And all the other categories are just made by grouping these species. So we just have to define species, and then we will automatically be able to define all the other categories. Now the series of these labels are known as taxonomic categories or taxonomic hierarchies. The taxonomic hierarchy is divided into 7 obligate ranks or groups that you can already see, which is kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus and species. And each of these categories individually are called taxon. So each of these categories individually are known as taxon. Now there is a very simple mnemonics to learn these categories in this particular order, and it is very important to learn these categories in this particular order. So what is the mnemonics? It goes like: keep pots clean, otherwise family gets sick. So the mnemonic reads: keep pots clean, otherwise family gets sick. So here keep is for kingdom, pots is for phylum, clean is for class, otherwise is for order, family is for family, gets is for genus, and sick is for species. Now in this particular hierarchy, kingdom is the largest, so our kingdom is our largest, and species is our smallest unit. Okay, so species is our smallest unit. And there is also another category on the top of the kingdom, which is called domain. But it has not been officially added in this particular hierarchy, so we are not going to study about it. But it is important to understand that there is another category above kingdom, which is domain. Now these 7 categories are the main ones. What are these 7 categories? Let's revise it again. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Keep pots clean, otherwise family gets sick. But there are some sub-hierarchies as well. For example, under species there is subspecies. So there is subspecies and variety under species. And there is also one thing called suborders, which is obviously under orders. So there is suborders. And there is a very important category that we all must know, and that can also be asked in exams. This is a subcategory which is called tribe. Now tribe lies between family and genus. So tribe is a very important category, and all of us must remember this. And we can compare this tribe to the human tribe that we all are already very familiar with. So in all there are around 21 to 22 categories that lie between these 7 main categories. Now let's talk about the general characteristics. So if we talk about the general characteristics, so we are talking about the general characteristics. So we talk about the general characteristics. They are present the most in kingdom, and they are present the least in species. General characteristics are the maximum in kingdom and least or minimum in species. But if we talk about specific characteristics, so if we talk about specific characteristics. So we talk about specific characteristics. Now they are maximum in, so they are maximum in species while they are minimum in kingdom. And this is very important because you can be asked the MCQ question on this basis, that where do we find the maximum general characteristics or where do we find the minimum general characteristics. So where we find the maximum general characteristics? In kingdom. And where do we find the minimum general characteristics? In species. But if the question is where do we find the maximum specific characteristics, then the answer will be species. And if the question is where do we find the minimum specific characteristics, then the answer will be kingdom. And we will attempt a question on this basis, so please understand this and remember this, how we are going about maximum to minimum when we talk about general and specific characteristics. So you must understand that classification basis changes at every level. Okay, so classification basis changes at every level. Let's understand this using an example. So for example, you have an almirah. Okay, so let's understand this concept by comparing it to your almirah. Now you classify your almirah by deciding that you will keep all your clothes in it, right? Now then you classify them on the basis of party clothes and then jeans and shirts, t-shirts or tops, and then your night suits, right? Now all of this is called classification. And here is one thing very important to note. Note that we also use the term division. We also use the term division for phylum. Now we use division for plants while we use phylum for animals. Similarly, there are the subspecies that we talked about under species. Subspecies is used for animals while variety is used for plants. Now let's define species. Now what is actually species? Okay. Now there are like a lot of definition of species given by many scientists. At first, we classified morphologically similar organisms as species. So the first type which was that we classified was morphologically. Yes. So at first we defined species on the morphologically similar organisms. They were all called as one species. Now this was known as the morphological species concept. But then we came to know that this is actually not true. Then someone said that organisms who live at the same place, second was people who were living at the same place are now called as species. But that's not true, because as we already know that humans are widespread. So our second one was also called the topographic basis. The second one was topographic basis, and that was rejected as well. Now after this we had the another one. Okay, so this one was given by Ernest Mayr, and this is the most widely accepted definition of species. And what does it say? It says species as a group of actually or potentially interbreeding populations that are reproductively isolated from other such groups. Now what is species? Species is a group of actually or potentially interbreeding populations. So population must be able to interbreed and that are reproductively isolated from other such groups. So this means they can only interbreed within their own species and they can't interbreed outside their species. And when we talk about interbreeding, this also means that they must have a fertile offspring. So after interbreeding, a fertile offspring is also necessary. So if the offspring is infertile, then we understand that they are not from the same species. One of the biggest examples for this is that we have a cross of horses and donkeys. So with this cross, what we actually get is mules. But this does not mean that horses and donkeys are the same species. Why? Because mules are infertile. In nature, mules are infertile. Okay, great. Now, let's talk about this question. Okay, so this question that we have with us. Which of the following taxonomical ranks contain organisms least similar to one another? So the question is, which of the following taxonomical ranks contain organisms least similar? So least is an important word, similar to one another. Okay, so we have to go for the least similar one. Let's revise the order of all the classes that we learned. which is keep pots clean, otherwise family gets sick, which is kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus and species. Okay, great. Now we have to find taxonomical ranks that contain least similar to one another. So we already learned that the most general characteristics are in kingdom, but the least general characteristics are in species. But what we are talking about here is that least similar to one another. So what we talk about, that species has the maximum specific characteristics. So here species are the most similar to one another. And as we go up this ladder, this decreases, the similarity between organisms decreases, and it is the least in kingdom and maximum in species. So according to this, we have four options: class, genus, family and species. So the taxonomical rank which lies higher in the hierarchy will have the least similar characteristics to one another. So here we have class, so class is here, then we have genus, then we have family, and then we have species. So as we can already see that class lies at the highest from these options. So the correct answer to this question is class. So which of the following taxonomical ranks contain organisms least similar to one another? The answer is option A, class. Now let's look at what is genus. Great. So now genus is divided between two types, monotypic and polytypic. Okay. Now what is monotypic and polytypic? So like monotypic genus is that which includes only one species. Okay. So example for that would be Homo sapiens. Who are Homo sapiens? Homo sapiens are us, humans. Okay, great. So we are an example of monotypic genus, because Homo sapiens have a monotypic genus which is called Homo. While polytypic genus is that which includes more than one species. So this has more than one living species. More than one living species. Okay. So an example for that could be the genus Panthera. So with Panthera we have a polytypic including lion, tiger, leopard and etc. So all the big cats, they come in the category of Panthera, like lion, tiger and leopard. Great. Now let's look at this particular table that we have with us. So here we have defined the taxons, which is kingdom, division, class, order, family, genus and species, and we have decided the suffix that will go with them. With kingdom there is no definite suffix. With division we have phyta for plants and spermae for animals. With class we have ne for plants and opsida for animals. With order we have Elise. With family we have Acee, so it's pronounced as Acee. With genus we have no definite suffix, and with species we have no definite suffix. You can find this table in the NCERT also, and it is very important to learn this because questions can be asked on what suffix we use for a particular taxon. So you must remember all of these suffixes. Now let's go with it. Again we have this another table with the organisms with their taxonomic categories. Organisms with their taxonomic categories. Once again, this is a table directly picked up from the NCERT that all of you must read, understand and remember by heart. For example, we have here the common name for man, its biological name Homo sapiens, the genus is Homo. Same with we have mango, which is Mangifera indica, and the genus is Mangifera. Like this, we have all of these four that we must remember and learn by heart because questions are asked from this particular table a lot in the exams. So take a screenshot of this or pause here, but learn this by heart. Great. Now let's move to question number 2. Now which of the following suffixes used for units of classification plants indicates a taxonomic category of family? So here we have to find the suffix for units of classification in plants indicates a taxonomic category of family. So if you remember the table that we just read earlier, you could easily understand and find the answer to this. Let's go back to the table once. So here we can see in the table with the family, the suffix that we have to use is Acee. With family our suffix is Acee. So with this, our answer here would be option C, a CE. Great. Now let's talk about taxonomical aids. Now taxonomical aids, as the name suggests, helps us in the classification system. So taxonomical aids actually helps us in the classification system. Now let us study all of these taxonomical aids, and the first one that we are going to talk about is the herbarium. Herbarium, let's break it down. Herbarium basically is an aid for plants. It is very easy to interpret it as we have herb in the first prefix of the entire word. So we have herbarium that starts with the word herb. So it's very important to understand that this place is only and only for plants. So we have dried plants here that are preserved. It is basically a quick referral system for morphology majorly, and it helps in the scientific study. Now the question is how to make a perfect herbarium sheet. There is a proper procedure that one must follow in which a specimen can be represented. The first step is to make a herbarium sheet is collection. The number one point that you must keep in mind while collecting the specimen is that plant should not be diseased. This is because if you collect a plant with disease, then not only the current specimen will be corrupted, but the other specimens in the herbarium will get diseased and maybe a fungus infection spreads. So the plant specimen must not be a diseased one. So in our first step of collection, we need to understand that the plant is not a diseased one. Now the second point is, if I collect a specimen with black spots or yellow curling of the leaf, then the other person must feel that this is the real morphology of that plant. And if I collect that specimen and I put it in the herbarium and it had black spots on it, now some other person in some other country tries to identify that same plant, he or she will think that these black spots are actually the original morphological feature of that plant. But you and I both know that it's not true. And the whole black spots were because of a disease of that plant. So we have to collect a specimen very, very carefully. The next point that needs to be taken care of while collecting a specimen is that you must collect the parts of the plant that has the most plant parts. Now it is very easy when you have a small plant or a sapling. Like you take up the whole plant and put it on the sheet. But when it is a large tree, what should we do then? In that case, you will take that twig of the plant in which maximum parts of the plant are seen. For example, a twig. So basically we take a twig that has leaves, stem, seeds and flowers. So basically a twig which has the maximum parts of the plant. Now sometimes there are plants whose flowers or seeds wilt very quickly. In that case, we can use a sachet and we can put the flowers and the seeds in the sachet and then stitch it on the herbarium sheet. Also, you must take care while bringing that twig to the lab because it shouldn't be damaged at the time of preservation. All these are the pointers that one must keep in mind while collecting a specimen. Now, after the collection, when the specimen has reached the lab, now the next step is to dry it. So our next step is to dry the specimen. And how do we do that? We don't go out in the sun and sun dry it. You just have to wrap it in the newspaper in a way that it does not get folded and then keep it under some pressure. Keep it under your mattress or under some heavy object so that the moisture is gone in the dried plant specimen. Now the moisture that the newspaper is absorbing can get infected and the specimen can get fungus. So it is really very important to change the newspapers regularly. And we must keep in mind that we have to change the newspapers regularly. In the starting, we would have to change the newspapers much more often than in the later stages. And if the fungus gets caught in that specimen, the specimen color will change and it will get destroyed. That is why it is very important to keep changing the newspapers regularly. Now the third and the most important point is poisoning. When the plant specimen is dried, we spray 0.1% solution of HgCl2. The mercury chloride will act as a disinfectant and will kill all the microbes present on it. The next step is mounting. This means that you keep the specimen on the herbarium sheet. Then the next step is to stitch that specimen. So our next step is to stitch the specimen with the herbarium sheet. Now it is not done with the glue because it will infect or it will poison the plant. So while stitching, it is not done with the glue. Okay, so when we are putting it, when we are mounting it on the paper at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we do not use glue. We have to stitch it. And how do we do this? We do it that we stitch with the thread at certain parts, at certain points, so that the plants get stitched to a herbarium sheet and does not fall off. The next step is to label that herbarium sheet. Now the herbarium sheet is standard all over the world and the size is 41 into 29 centimeter square. Now this is the size of the herbarium sheet that is accepted all over the world. And when we write a label, we put it on the right bottom corner of the herbarium sheet. Okay, and there is also perfect size for that label and we must follow it, and the size is 7 into 12 centimeter square. Now the question is, when we put a label, what do we have to actually write on that label? So there are some specific things that are to be written on the label, and they are: first, it is the name of the collector. Second is the place of collection. Third is date of collection. Fourth is the botanical name of that plant. Fifth is the English name of the plant. And the sixth is the vernacular name of the plant. This means the common name of that plant. Now the vernacular name depends upon the area where you have collected the specimen. Now what is the common name? That common name of that particular plant in that area where the plant has been collected. So we need to write that name too. And the seventh is that we need to write the family of that plant. Now there are more points like height of the plant and the economic importance of the plant that you can also write on the label. But these are not the major things. So you can skip them, and there is no hard and fast rule to write them every time when you are writing the label. But the 7 points we discussed earlier, which is the name of the collector, place of collection, date of collection, botanical name, English name, vernacular name, and family of the plant. All these 7s are really important and we have to write them every time we are preparing the label. Now the last step after labeling is deposition. So we are now going to deposit that herbarium. Means that this herbarium sheet that you have made is to be placed on a place where it can be found easily. So the herbarium is a storehouse of collected, dried, pressed and preserved plant specimen. So there are herbariums that are present at the national level. For example, the Royal Botanical Garden at Kew in England and the Central National Herbarium at Calcutta. As you can see, there is a survey of the plant herbarium. So this is what a normal herbarium looks like. Now let's look at the next taxonomical aid that we have with us, that is the museums. Now what are museums and what do they do? It is for the storing, preservation and exhibition of both plants and animals. So in museum we find both plants and animals. And why we are doing this? This is used for studying and reference. So as you can see, we have 3 pictures here. In the first, it is called the formalin preserved. So as you can see, there are organisms present in it, and the acid that being used is the formalin acid. And this is how they are being preserved, so that their body does not decomposes and it stays intact for anyone to observe at a later stage. This is formalin preserved. Another type of preservation that we have is stuffed preservation. As you can see in this particular image, that you can see that there are animals, which is with like perfect statues of these animals. So what do we do in stuffed preservation? So we take the animal, we take out all the internal organs out of them, just keep the main structure, the bones and the skin. We use a preservative coating inside of the animal so that the skin does not decomposes from the inside, and we use a preservative on the outside skin also so that the skin doesn't get decomposes from the outside. And then we put cotton inside of it. So we stuff it with cotton, hence the name stuffed preservation. The third one we have is pinned. So in PINT, what we do is that in certain insects, or in certain insects, what we do, like for a butterfly or a beetle, as you can see, what do we do is that we take that beetle, the dead beetle, and what we do, we put them with, use their wings, and we put them, we stitch them with thumb pins or something else on a particular sheet for everyone to see. We do this with butterflies and other type of insects like beetles and butterflies. Great. As you can see, now our next is the botanical gardens. This is the third type of our taxonomical aid. Now here it's written the term XC2 conservation. What do we mean by this? In a botanical garden, what we do is that we take out species from their natural habitat, take them out, and then we conserve them at a different place. That is what a botanical garden is all about. So XC2 stands for X situated. So earlier the plant was situated at a different place, and now it is at a different place for the preservation and the conservation of that particular plant. Some of the examples of botanical gardens are National Botanical Garden, Lucknow, Indian Botanical Garden, Havra, Royal Botanical Garden, England. Great. As you can see, there are some pictures of students studying and understanding about the botanical gardens in Lucknow. Then there is an Indian Botanical Garden in Havra. The next one we have there is zoological parks. So zoological parks are of course for the animals. Again, and zoological parks are also the XC2. So the animals were present in a different habitat, and we take them out from that habitat and we conserve them in different zoological parks. So living wild animals are kept in protected environment. How is the environment in zoological parks? Protected. So here no one is going to hunt them or harm them in any sense. So that is why we call it a protected environment. Again, it's a XC2 conservation of animals, because we are taking animals from one habitat where they are situated to a different one. And the third point is ideal means to study and learn different food habits and behavior of animals. So zoological parks are an ideal place to study for different food habits and behavior of animals. Great. So this is the National Zoological Park. So as you can see, there is a tiger here in its protected environment. Let's look at this question. So one of the most important functions of botanical garden is that first, they provide a beautiful area for recreation. Second, one can observe tropical plants there. Third, they allow XC2 conservation of germplasm. And fourth, they provide the natural habitat for wildlife. Let's look at it. First, they provide a beautiful area for recreation. Of course, all the botanical gardens are made in a very beautiful way. They are very aesthetic to look at. They are very aesthetic to be at. They are beautiful. But they are not made for the purpose of recreation. So when you talk about the most important function of a botanical garden, it won't be recreation. So answer A, the option A is wrong. The second is one can observe tropical plants there. So yes, one can observe tropical plants there, but there are a lot more plants in a botanical garden than just a tropical plants. So again, this is not the most important function of a botanical garden. Now look at option C. They allow XC2 conservation of germplasm. Of course, as we read, this is an XC2 conservation is there in a botanical garden. And for germplasm, what we means is different variety, and at the times all variety of plants and of all plants. So yes, they allow XC2 conservation of germplasm. This is correct, and this is the most important function of a botanical garden. It is to XC2 conservation of germplasm. So option C is correct. But for reference, also look at option D. Here option D, it states they provide a natural habitat for wildlife. And we all know botanical gardens are specifically for plants. Hence, wildlife is wrong. So option D is also wrong. So the correct answer is option C. Now let's understand what are taxonomical keys. So taxonomical keys are basically an analytical tool. And what do? They help in identification of plants and animals based on similarities and dissimilarities. So what basically happens is that we see a particular creature that we do not know much about. So first of all, we give a lead to it. Okay, so we provide a couplet to each of it first of all, which is a pair of contrasting characters. So maybe the plant has roots, fibrous roots, or tabbed roots, or the animal has fur or no fur. So these are a pair of contrasting characters which are called couplet. And with that we get leads of each statement to follow through, and then separate keys are used for different taxonomic categories. Let's understand it with an example. So basically, suppose you found a vertebrate class and you saw that that vertebrate class does not have any fur. So we go for this. Now, does it have feathers or not? Assuming it has no feathers. So we go for this. Then if we talk about does external fertilization or internal fertilization? So if it does internal fertilization, it will be a reptile. But if it does external fertilization, then again we have two parts. Does it have gills in adult or no gills in adult? If it has gills in adult, it will be a fish. If it has no gills in adult, it will be an amphibian. See, we just knew about some part of it and we started giving couplets to each one of them. And after understanding the lead out of that couplet, we went on to our classification. At the end stage, we are able to find out that either if it's a fish or an amphibian. Great. So this is all about taxonomical keys. Now let's talk about question number 4. Which one of the following is not a correct statement? The first statement is herbarium houses dried, pressed and preserved plant specimens. If you know about herbarium, we know that this is correct. Next is botanical gardens have collection of living plants for reference. That's true too. A botanical garden does have a living plants for references and has a whole collection of it because it conserves the living plants. C. A museum has collection of photographs of plants and animals. So photographs is the key word here. Let's come back to it. The last is key is a taxonomic aid for identification of specimens. As we just read taxonomical key, yes, that's true. And we have to find the statement which is not a correct statement. So if we talk about this, the most inappropriate or not true statement out of all 4 will be a museum has a collection of photographs of plants and animals. Because a museum has a lot more than just the photographs. It has stuff, as we talked about, different preservatives and different collections. No, not just the photographs. Photographs are rarely present in museums. So that is the thing. So option C will be wrong here. So it will be the most untrue statement out of this 4. Great. With this, we have come to the end of taxonomic hierarchies and taxonomical aids, and I hope all of you understood all the concepts properly.